I still remember that day. It's incredible. I remember answering the phone. I could see myself answering the phone. But he was my brother, and he was asking me to do this, so I had no reason to say no. My name is Michael Correia. I was born in New Bedford, Massachusetts. My parents are from the island of St. Michael in the Azores. They both grew up in poverty in that island, but their richness was in their family and in the Catholic faith, and especially devotion to Our Lady and Our Lady of Fatima and the Rosary. My grandmother and my mother, I would always see them with a rosary in their hand. And growing up, the rosary was prayed every day in the evening in my family. And growing up as a child, my mom would teach us to pray the rosary. And it wasn't just sitting down praying the rosary. My mom would have us kneel on a hardwood floor praying the rosary. And she would teach us at the end of the rosary the prayer that the Angel of Fatima would say. And she would have us bow and put our foreheads to the hardwood floor and recite that prayer. So, and of course, I was very little at that time. I remember it. I didn't remember the prayers, but I would mimic them. So, and pray in those prayers. I grew up in a time where Sunday was really the Lord's day, and we would get ready in the morning. We'd go to Mass, come home, have a large lunch dinner, and then at 3 p.m. we'd go back to church for a holy hour, in holy hour rosary benediction. And then we'd go back, the whole family, uncles, aunts, my parents, my grandparents. We'd go to my grandparents' house, cousins were all there, and we would have a meal together, and we'd spend that time. And I love Sundays. All the stores were closed. It was truly a family day, unlike what we have today. I love Sundays. I always looked forward to Sunday. I was always very sad on Monday. I really was. I felt like, I gotta wait till the next Sunday. This is the truth. So my father was a construction worker, so as soon as he got to the States, he started working right away. My mother worked in a factory, and so strong was her belief in our Catholic faith that she put all of us through the Catholic school. Of course, she had to pay for that. And in order to do that, she also took a second job, working at night. So, and it was a big sacrifice for her to do that, but she did that because of she wanted us to be truly raised in our Catholic faith and go to Catholic schools. So my mom, after she passed away, my godmother, she came and she told me, said, I just want to tell you something. Your mom worked that second job, and she told me it was such a sacrifice because I was very young, and she wasn't there all day, and I didn't see her all day. So, but my godmother told me she entrusted me to Our Lady. She said, I'm doing this for that reason. And she said, Our Lady will take care of him and watch over him. So, such was her great faith in Our Lady, and of course, in wanting to make sure that her children were raised in the Catholic faith. So you would think at this point that I'd be a candidate for sainthood right now, being brought up in such a strong, devoted family, especially to Our Lady and the Rosary. But during my teenage years and in high school and growing up, then I started not practicing my faith. My mom and dad would still pray the Rosary, and we would, even at that time when we got together to pray the Rosary, it was more of a, whatever, let me just get through this. So even at that time, started walking away from really practicing my faith. One of the biggest things I was doing is playing sports, playing soccer. That was more important to me than practicing my faith or the Rosary. We got busy with school, homework after school, sports, going out with friends. The fact of not really praying the Rosary, being anchored that way, was probably one of the things that made it easy to walk away. So in both that in high school and then college, and in the freedom, having a car and doing whatever you want, and not really praying daily. Praying daily, that was one thing. Once I start not praying daily, then it gets a little slipperier from there. Missing Mass, or going to Mass and just thinking about anything else that besides being at Mass, both myself and my siblings, we kind of just all walked away with my mom, with all her sacrifices of getting us through Catholic school, and even my siblings going to a Catholic high school. Basically, we really broke our mother's heart during that time. And my grandmother would tell my mother, don't worry. Always have faith, trust Him to Our Lady. You will see your children come back to their faith. In 1994, I got married to my wife, Patricia. And at that time, we were, just like before, we were really practicing our faith. We were nominal Catholics. We would go to Mass off and on. We're going to the sacraments, going to confession. We were just living in the world, concerned about, having things, and going out with our friends and just living that life. Meanwhile, my mom was always praying the rosary, always being, praying for us at that time, and I knew that, but we weren't really practicing our faith. We were just, living for the world, for things. Then one day, I remember coming home. I was out with my wife. We came home, and I believe she wanted to go do something, go somewhere, and I told her flat out, I had no desire to go out. I just want to be home. And I remember being home, and the phone rang, and I still see myself going to the phone, answering the phone, and it was my brother Mario who was calling me, and he asked me, would you like to go down to the chapel and to get clothed with the scapular? So far from it. I've never expected that call from my brother Mario. And my response wasn't like, what are you talking about? My response was, sure, I'll go with you. And then I remember him picking me up. I don't recall the conversation that we had going to the chapel, but I think I was a little taken back. I didn't know my brother was, even contemplating that, thinking about that, or that he was going to the chapel. I had no idea. But so I went with him, and I remember going to chapel. I don't know if it was a feast day of Our Lady but I remember there was other people there, and we were at the altar of Our Lady. I remember Father, he said, I was clothed with the scapular, and I remember looking up to him, and he looked like he was a giant, like he was, I don't know. And I remember him telling me, looking right at me, saying, now you have to pray the rosary every day. So I just came from not wanting to go out, just wanting to be home. I tell my wife, arguing with her, say, I just want to stay home. I don't want to go out, till one phone call, a question, an answer. And I found myself at the chapel, clothed with the scapular, being told I have to pray the rosary every day. Isn't that incredible? It's incredible. I remember saying, wow. I still remember that day. I decided that night that the next day I would stop praying the rosary. At that time, I had really couldn't remember the mysteries of the rosary. You would think I would remember it, but the beads, I was getting a little confused between the beads. It was actually my wife that corrected me, saying I was doing it wrong. But I would pray the rosary every day. I didn't have a crucifix at home. I didn't have a statue of Our Lady at home at that time. Remember, I came from not practicing my faith, not saying prayers daily, to all of a sudden I'm going to stop praying the rosary every day. So I remember going to purchase a crucifix. I put it on the bureau that we had at home. I made that my little prayer area, and every day on my knees, I would pray the rosary. Now, at that time, my wife thought, who is this guy that I married? He's like, all of a sudden, just total turnaround. And she's like, you're praying the rosary. Why? And I would pray it on my own at that time. So every day, I would take the time and I would pray the rosary every day. From there, my brother would say, well, we'll go to daily Mass. Would you like to join me? So I started going to daily Mass after that, still praying the rosary every day. From there, I hadn't gone to confession in a long time. I went to confession. After so many years. From there, I started going to spiritual direction at the chapel. And I still remember that day. Things like, about the spiritual life. And I was like, oh, wow, this is like a whole new world for me. So, and still, the rosary was the center of that. At the same time, I experienced some moments that were a little dark. I remember praying the rosary and feeling this evil presence behind me, and it was basically to have me stop praying the rosary. There was other time that I was praying the rosary, the window wasn't open, there was nothing there, and I heard this loud noise, a thing flapping of paper on top of where I had the crucifix as I was praying. And at first I was like ready to run out of the bedroom, but then I stayed there, and I said I knew it was coming from, and even though it was fear and trembling, I still continued, and I finished praying the rosary. So it was always odd. It was I had in my bedroom, there were times I would hear my name called, and it wasn't like anything good. It was from the evil one, and all these things to have me stop praying the rosary. When I started praying the rosary, my wife, as I said before, would say, "Who is this guy that I married?" Not only that, I threw out so many things, so music, CDs. I threw all these things without even asking her, which is not a good idea to do. But I just wanted to get rid of anything that I knew wasn't pleasing to God and to Our Lady. So my wife, she was really upset to the point of tears, saying, why am I doing this to her? Why, this big change of things. I remember I remember being in the car and driving. We went for a ride after we went to Mass. And I remember her even in tears saying, "Why are you doing this to me?" And at that moment I was like, okay, I should just stop this and stop doing this, and because I'm going to destroy our marriage over this. But I had a peace in the midst of all that this is the right thing. I need to keep going. I need to keep doing this. And I just have to wait for her to understand that. I kept praying to Our Lady to please help her to understand. And eventually, she also started praying with me. The two of us, from not practicing our faith, would be praying the rosary together every day. So with doing that, we grew closer together. And we had the birth of our first child, our second child, our third child, fourth, fifth. So we have 5 children, and we would pray the rosary with them. They were little. We did the same thing. Wonderful example of my parents, especially my mother. So I knew that was the way to raise my children, is also to teach them to pray the rosary, to make the rosary important. We consecrated our children to Our Lady on their baptismal day. And I remind them that we did that as parents, but as adults, they need to do the same thing. This has to be theirs. The rosary has to be theirs, not just what dad's or mom's doing. There was one time I was praying the rosary, and this is after I already had gone to confession after many years, going to daily Mass. I was praying the rosary, and all of a sudden I could see sins that I totally forgot, sins I needed to confess. As I was praying the rosary, it was like watching a movie. And I remember seeing the sins and the next sin and the next sin. I was like, oh my. So the next day I went to confession, and I remember it was St. Joseph's Church. I went to confession there. I confessed those sins that I totally forgot about. And I remember when I walked out of the church, these big doors of the church of St. Joseph's, I opened up the doors and I stood out there, and the sun was as bright as I've ever seen the sun, the warmth of the sun, and I was immersed in that. And it made me think, as I was thinking about that, that's the state of my soul right now. It's that brilliance of my soul after making that confession. And that was a wonderful gift through the rosary that Our Lady gave me to remember those sins, to make me aware of them. I totally forgot about them, and of course I needed to confess them. The prophecy that my grandmother had told my mom about don't lose faith about your children, you brought them up with a great devotion to Our Lady, it came true. All of us came back to the faith. After my brother called me and I was enrolled in the Scapular, we double-teamed my brother Tony, and he also started going to Mass, daily Mass with us. We would get together every weekend, pray the rosary together, share the faith. It was, once again, going back to the Sundays that we had when we were children. making it the Lord's Day. And we would spend the afternoon in prayer. My sister too, seeing her brothers doing the same, she also started, going back, praying the rosary with us. So we all came back to the faith. To this day, myself, my brother, and my brother Tony are all solemnly professed Franciscan Churches of the Immaculate with a total consecration to Our Lady. My sister had passed away already, but we all came back. And my mother was alive to see us all come back to the faith. And to this day, the rosary is still important to all of us, the center of our lives. St. Maximilian Kolbe, he states, well, wherever Our Lady enters, she obtains the grace of conversion and sanctification. And through this journey of mine, that's self-evident that Our Lady was always there in our lives, even when we strayed away. So wherever Our Lady's present, there's always that conversion, sanctification. Wherever she enters, wherever she is in anyone's life, just that moment of me going back, being clothed with a scapular, praying the rosary, bringing Our Lady back into my life, you see that conversion.